As promised, here is the raw footage for the 3 ATSC to NTSC converter boxes, the 3 memorex ones that I had with various problems. This is all the raw footage of what I had to go through to fix the problem. So when you have one of these old TVs like this, of course they're not going to receive anything off air because these are analog. And as you can see, this one's working a lot better now than it was when I first started on it. That's programming. This is coming off of my my existing cable box through my modulator network that I've got in the house. The brightness is a little too high here. We'll just bring the brightness down just a smidge. It's a little better. That's the news channel that I've got on here. And some of my in-house channels. You can see the detail has come right back on this set now. Fine-tuning. These are channels that I run inside the house here, but to receive off air on this, if you don't have cable, or cable won't do you any good now anyway, because the analog channels are gone. You have to have a cable box from the cable company, which will have an analog output. But if you just want to receive off-air TV, then you need to use a box like this. This is an off-air box. This one's broken, so we're going to fix it. It has your antenna input and it has your NTSC output, and that'll work fine with a little color TV or a little black and white set just like that. We're going to get this one going, and I'm going to hook it up to this black and white TV, and we're going to look at some old vintage programming from the oldies stations. I put these boxes, I've got a couple of them, I'm going to fix a few of them. But I was using these things for years when most of my televisions were analog sets and did not have digital tuners built in. So I used these to receive the off-air stations and fed them into modulators. What's happened since then is, of course, most of my TVs have been replaced with TVs that have got off-air tuners. And when these boxes, these things aren't very reliable. I was leaving them run 24 hours a day, and when they started to fail, I took them out of service and just rely on the digital tuner built in. But there's a couple channels that have come up now that are not available on my cable service, and I've still got a couple televisions that don't have a digital tuner built in, so I think I might like to get one of these going anyway so that I can put one channel that has got some pretty good programming on it on my in-house cable. So let's get into this memorex, and we'll get it going and see how it works on this little old TV. Now, since these have been serviced before, and I know that the failure on this is likely going to be very similar to what's happened in the past, it's the power supplies. They are just absolute rubbish on these sets. The power supplies have been rebuilt on. I've got 3 of these memorex, and I have an Apex, and the Apex, a MOSFET blew apart in it, and I haven't bothered to fix it, but I might. And these ones here, the big problem with these ones is filter capacitors just, they blow up. So I'm thinking that's probably all that's wrong with this one again, is the filter caps. The same ones that have failed on it already twice. This will be the 3rd time. They seem to go for a couple of years and then they dry up. And it's probably just due to the design of these things. The heat is concentrated. So here's the power supply, and I can pretty much guarantee that the problem with this thing is going to be these caps in here have gone bad again, I think, probably. We'll test them and change them. As I say, I'd like to get one box working. If I get more than one working, great, but one working will be great, because I can put it on a modulator that I've got, and you know, then have an extra station that I can pick up throughout the house on any TV. So I'll start by removing the power supply again. Unplug this and just remove the screws, and then the power board should lift right out on this, and then I can work on it. should lift out. There we go. Okay, here's the power board, and yeah, it's going to be these. I guarantee it's going to be these caps. It's such a bad design. I guess they build up a fair bit of heat in here, and all the parts crammed together. And as you notice, of course, they don't have a lot in terms of ventilation. That chip is going to get pretty warm, and these units do get quite warm when they're running. These were cheap, right? These were the ones that, you know, sold for like 30 or 40 bucks back when they and a lot of them were subsidized by the American government. They gave people coupons to get them because of the mandated changeover from analog to digital. This was for people with the older TVs. So they're not as popular as they used to be. I think they can probably still get these things around, but these things used to be a dime a dozen, and I picked these ones up for, I forget what I paid for them. I think I paid 15 or 20 bucks. They weren't expensive, but I say they certainly have not been very reliable over the years. And it's always been the same parts going bad. So I grabbed the ESR meter, we'll measure the ESR. I guarantee that it's going to be through the roof, even though there's no physical signs of the caps bulging. That's what it's going to be. Well, let's look at the some of the ESR on these caps and just see which ones are bad. That doesn't look too bad. 0.08. When I took this out, this screw was loose. Like it had worked its way loose. I wonder if the caps are actually okay, and that screw had just worked its way loose from heating and cooling, because I'm going to disconnect a couple of the caps here and just test them out of circuit. We got a couple. There's caps in parallel with each other, and that would certainly change my reading. So I'm just going to take a few of them out just to measure them and see whether there are some that are bad. I think the symptom looks like a bad capacitor, but when I put the meter across them, they're measuring okay. But there are caps in parallel with each other, so that could certainly skew the results. So I'm just going to pull a couple of them out here and actually measure them out of circuit. We'll start with this one over here, this 10 volt one over here. Where is it? This one is a 1010 volts. So 1010 volts should be 0.12 maximum. 0.12. That looks okay. 0.9. I think that one's okay. We'll put that one back. This one is also 0.06. This one's a 330 and 0.6 and 0.23. This was a 25 volt. So between a 0.12 and a 0.23. 0.12 and 0.23. I think we're okay on that one. I can now test this other one that's in circuit that was in parallel with it, because I've taken this one out. .08, and then there's this other one over here. It's also 0.08. They're testing okay. I think this might be the problem, and it's not the caps. Watch this coil. I do believe that those connections are broken right there. I'm going to put the original ones back in, fix that problem, and we'll try this thing. Also, I noticed that this plug is disintegrating here as well, which was another common problem with these. So that pin may have been coming loose, because the caps that were in there do not test bad. They actually test in good shape, all of them. So we'll put the caps back in and fix that connection on that coil and try this thing again and see whether it works. Where's my fourth one? It's over here. They all tested good. And then that coil that was bad is right here. You see it. See it right here? So we're going to fix that. And that looks like the trace has actually got a crack in it. Right there. So I'm just going to bridge a piece of wire over to the capacitor next to it. And I'm going to bridge it to this cap as well, because these are in parallel. So you get a piece of wire here. Oops, didn't want that to happen. What happens when you put too much heat into the wire, it just comes off. Solder it right back to the diode here. See, this screw is also loose when I took it apart. So it may have worked its way loose just over the years. And that's a ground screw, so that may have been part of the problem, but I think it was that coil that had, the solder connection had fractured, is I think probably what was wrong with it this time. So let me get this plug back in here and get that last pin down into the board where it belongs, because these plugs fall apart. I have another one that the plug fell apart on, and I actually had to solder all the wires in place. Okay, now that's connected. I'm just going to connect this up to my plasma TV at the moment. It's on. And just see whether I get any menus come up on this when I power it up. And then we'll hook up an antenna to it, see if it'll pull in any signals. Okay, I got a red light, that's a good sign. Oh, DTV tuner boot up loading. That's a good sign, because it wasn't doing that before. It wasn't actually doing anything before. So let me just connect the antenna and see whether this thing will actually pull any channels in. This is just an indoor antenna, so I don't know what it's going to be like as far as reception goes. Got a green light on it, that's a good sign. I have no picture yet. I still see no picture. I'm just going to check some voltages here, because the voltages are labeled on here. It should be 12 volts. And it's not. And this one should be, I think this is 4 volts here. I may not be on the right ground point. Try that. Oh, it'd help if I'm in DC voltage. You hear my birds whistling again. "7 volts, that's correct. 4 volts, that's correct. And the 12 volts appears to be missing. Well, that would explain why it doesn't pick anything up. We'll pull this power supply again and trace that 12 volt line and see where it's going. After tracing this, this is the 12 volt pin here. We'll see that the 12 volt pin comes along here to where there's nothing populated on the board. So this is a disconnected circuit. Also, this one, the wire is broken for the connector. That goes down to this side of the connector right here. And if we notice, this one here also goes down to this area of the board where there's no components. So those two lines are actually dead, insignificant. The only power supplies that appear to be connected on this is the 4 and the 7 volt lines. Looks like that's the only ones that are actually doing anything. So that's not the problem. Let's put it back in and see why it's not working. See, this is all I get when I power it up, which is more than I got before. I didn't get to this stage before. I get my DTV tuner boot up loading, and then it does nothing. When I first tried it, before taking the board out and fixing that connection, I got nothing. I wouldn't even get to this point. I'm going to grab the remote and see whether I can bring up the menu on this thing. Well, interesting. Okay, I get the menu for the setup. Let's try an auto scan and see whether we find any channels. Now, the antenna I've got on there is not a very good one, but it will hopefully pick up something. It's one of these flat, plain, hang in the window type, and it's just hanging up against the wall. So whether it's going to actually pick anything up or not, we'll find out. It's got an active power supply, so it does have power. I'll take this and try this on my other antenna if it doesn't pick anything up off this. I know this antenna has worked in the past, but I actually, the last time I used it, I put it out in front of the house, put it out the door. But it is entirely possible that the tuner is not working on this. It's not looking good. Should have found a bunch of channels. I can get about, I think I can get 14 or 15 channels here. It hasn't found anything yet. And it doesn't look like it's going to find anything. It's, no channels. So maybe the tuner itself is shot. Okay, so I'm finding some channels now, so I know the tuner is working on this. We'll let it continue its scan. I just hooked it up to my rooftop antenna, so obviously that little flat antenna that I've got in here is NFG, no good. So we'll let this finish the scan, and then we'll see what channels I can pull in on this little tuner box. Well, I got a nice freeze frame. The signal on this cable, I've got it split a few times in the shop here, and it's just not quite strong enough to pull in a digital signal on this device, that's for sure, because I've got the feed coming in here is split. This is normally just used with my modulator signal, and the signal here is split, what is it, about 4 or 5 ways, so it's not going to be very strong on this cable. Not like if I put this in my media closet right plugged into the antenna. So I've now put the unit in my closet. I'm just feeding it into here. It's hooked up to my antenna without going through, you know, a bunch of extra splitters and stuff. This is connected up to one of my antennas. As you can see, wow, got 10 channels found so far. This is just feeding in here on a modulated signal. That's why the picture's not as clear. And we'll see what this thing gets and see what type of channels it picks up. But that's the difference between a good signal and a bad one. These are the ones I was kind of interested in. Like, there's a bunch of channels here, the 12.1 to 12.5. The only one that's carried on our local cable is this one here, 12.3, Me TV. These other ones here are not carried, so I'm thinking I might like to put a couple of these modulators in just so that I can run a couple of these channels onto my analog network and put these channels on. This is actually a different antenna. This is one facing towards the south to pick up the American channels, because my other antenna faces north. So the 12.1 to 12.5 don't come in the greatest on my televisions, my digital sets. But this antenna is facing the other direction, so this one looks like it might work. Let's just take a look at what channels I can get. So this is the channel Heroes and Icons that I've now got. Picking it up off air. So there's 5 channels, and I'm going to set this thing back up. Now that I've got it working, I'm going to set this back up on one of my modulated channels now that I've got this little unit working. But these are perfect for these old televisions that don't have a digital tuner built in. Even on this little black and white set, it looks great.
To buy gold filled with new and exclusive information.
So if you got one of these little old sets, a little black and white TV, or a little small color set that you want to use and you want to pick up off air, you just need one of those digital converter boxes. So say they're a dime a dozen. You can pick the things up dirt cheap. That's all you need. That and an antenna, and then you can get the free programming on your old TV. Anyway, now that I've got one of these modulators or one of these tuners working, I'm going to check the other 2 memorex ones, because they both failed as well, and I'm wondering whether maybe it was the same problem on them, that it wasn't capacitors this time, it was something else in the power supply, because in this case it was a broken connection that went bad on one of the little coils and killed the entire unit. Anyway, that's that back fixed. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Here are the other two. This one I plug it in, and you notice this one here. This one definitely has a power supply problem. It's flashing red. It won't turn on. So this one definitely has a power supply problem. The third one doesn't even do anything. So I figured, what the heck, while I'm on a roll, let's see what's wrong with the other two. Maybe I can get them going too. As I say, these things, well, I got 3 of them and all 3 of them are shot. So that gives you an idea of how reliable these little converter boxes are and were. And I have a fourth one was an Apex, and it doesn't work. These were terrible electronics. Nothing like the old TV that lasts 40 years. Not these things. I think these things were produced and sold at a price, well, most of them in the States were government subsidized, that they produced just to get people going during the direct TV, or the digital TV, not direct TV, digital TV transition. And they were made as cheaply as they possibly could make them. So as you can see, this one's had its filters replaced on it too. These 3 were replaced on this one. And we'll take a look at the power supply on this bad boy and see whether the filters have gone bad again on this. That screw is also loose. Now I can assure you that when I put it together, I didn't leave the screw loose. I tightened it down. Let's take a look at this power supply. This one's pulsing off and on. So it might be a cap that's bad on here. It might be even one of the ones on the primary side, just because the symptom of this is a little different than the other ones. And these caps don't look like they've bulged or anything. Check that connection on this coil. Get a closer look at that one. Well, here's that coil. If I wiggle it, you'll see that it is actually bad too. Look. I would say that's going bad on this one. I'm going to redo those, and I'm going to check the caps again and some of the ones over on the primary side. See whether there's any problem with them, but this looks like an ongoing issue with these things. Looks like they got the same type of problems. But this one here is definitely, this connection here is definitely bad on that inductor. And the other inductor is over here. Do the diodes as well. The one little cap that I suspect might be causing a problem is this little one down here. It's a small, what is it, about a 1 microfarad, probably 250 volts, or is it, no, 22 at 35. Some of them use a real small one that is used as a kicker. And of course this bloody crappy glue that they've got all over the board. But let me just check this one here. This is in the primary side, and the fact that this thing's pulsing on and off indicates that the oscillator's starting and stopping. And that could be something in the primary side that's causing that, as opposed to a capacitor in the secondary side. So let's just get the ESR tester, and we'll see what this one looks like. So this is this little one right here. 2930 ohms, and it's a 22 at 35 volts. So 22 at 35 volts should be like 1.5. I think that's the one that's bad. What do you guys think? Let's change it. Let's change it and see whether that fixes this one. That's good, because this is a different problem than we normally run on. Usually it's the filters on the secondary side. As I say, I've changed them on these ones. These have all been changed before, so this is a different one, and I say it's the first one I've went to. And there it is, it's out. Clean up that board a bit so I can put a new one in. My bird is still making noise. That's a lot louder outside, by the way. I mean, I'm inside the workshop here, and the door's closed, and I have insulation in here, so that bird is actually quite annoying. Bald eagle. That's what it is. As I've said in posts, we have literally hundreds of them. America's bird my ass. Yeah, that's definitely bad. It's we have hundreds of bald eagles here in this area. It should be Canada's national bird, not the stupid goose, because the numbers that we have here is just, it's quite amazing. We have there's a lot of farmland around here, not where I am, but in the outlying areas around me, and there's a lot of food for them. There's a lot of rabbits, there's a lot of rats, mice. They got the ocean, they got fish. Now we got a garbage dump and a composting facility about, I guess, about 10 kilometers away or so, about 10 kilometers away, the next town over. And that gives them a tremendous food source throughout the winter, so they don't leave. They stay here year-round, and say we have hundreds of them. There's been times when I've been driving out the freeway and I wish I had a camera with me with a good lens, because it's like a tree and it's just full. There was a tree that it must have had 150 eagles. I kid you not, sitting in it. It was just ridiculous. But they are a problem for people, because they have snatched small dogs from people and cats. So they can be a bit of a pest if you're, you know, it might be nice to look at, but when it takes your cat or dog and eats it, then people aren't too happy with them. We find another cap and we'll see whether that fixes this one, and I bet it does. This one's getting a brand new cap. I got lots of these small ones. Actually, I got quite a few caps of all different sizes now, because I stocked up on some of them. The last time I fixed these things, I just used recycled caps out of whatever old power supply I had kicking around. Thumbs down in 3, 2, 1. I do that just to piss off the haters. I actually do have side cutters. I got many pairs of side cutters. But I like my good old snips, my good old Klein scissors, because they do a nice clean job on here. And I know it pisses people off, so that's why I do it. The way I look at it is that those out there that hate me using my electrician's scissors to snip components, the only reason they hate them is because they've never used them. If they actually used a set, they probably wouldn't be bitching about them, because they have a superior cut to most other things I've ever used. Okay, let's power this thing up and see if it blinks its power light like it was doing before. So remember, it was blinking the power light? Well, no more blinky light. And when I press the power, it turns green because it's now turned on. Let's see if this one fares any better than the other one as far as receiving from that indoor antenna. This one's doing weird things, so I'm going to go into the reset all menu. I'm going to reset this thing and see whether this will yeah, see, it says it can't find any channels. Like it didn't even try. It didn't even try to scan. This one is weird. It doesn't even try to scan the channels. It should go through looking, even if it's not hooked up to an antenna, it should go through looking, and this one is not doing it. Interesting. Here's the third one. This one here won't even power up. This is the one that the connector broke, so I've got 3 of them soldered down to the bottom. But this one won't even attempt to power up. I'm curious as to whether it's the same. That same cap is probably bad on this one. The same cap's probably bad on the other one too. That's the one that's working. It just hasn't failed yet. I'm going to take this one power supply out. I can't lift this one all the way out because it's soldered in place, but we'll see whether this cap is bad on here. I bet it is. Now this one, because the power supply didn't start, there's a good chance that the main filter is holding a charge. But it isn't. It's draining itself down, so that's not a problem. We'll check the ESR on that oscillator cap here. It's open like the other one. So I'll swap that one out and see if this one will boot up. the moment of truth. Will this one power up? Ah, it does. So that cap was bad. Let's see whether I can get a signal off of this one and get this one to tune anything. So that might be the other one that's just got a problem. Okay, this one will power it up. Now I gotta find where's my remote. We'll see if this one will do anything more. Takes a second to power up. It's kind of behaving a bit weird. Maybe those other caps are bad. Menu's not coming up on this one. I know they take a few seconds to boot, but power it off and on again. Okay, no signal. Auto scan. Now they say this is the bad antenna, so I'm not thinking this is going to pull in anything, but we'll see. Maybe the other tuner isn't quite as sensitive, but we'll see if this one pulls in any channels. If it doesn't, then I'll go and hook it up to the big antenna. We'll do a scan on it and see if this one's working. And then I'll have 2 of the 3 fixed. Already this one's showing more promise than the other one, because the other one got no channels on this little antenna hanging on the wall, and this one has found 6 so far. So I think the tuner in this one may be a little more sensitive. I'll let it go through the rest of the scan and see if it pulls any more in. As you can see, it's found 11 so far, with an antenna that got nothing on the other box. Well, there it's finished the scan. I'm actually getting a picture off this one. Yeah, lots of shopping channels. Channels that everybody wants, right? Like 3 shopping channels. I'm going to take this one in and hook it up to the bigger antenna, and we'll do a scan and see how well this one works. So I've got it on the big antenna now. We'll see what channels it finds on the big antenna. It should find more than there it is. Oh boy, is it ever. It's getting channel 28, KBTC, NHK World Service. This is getting a lot more than the other one. And it hasn't even finished scanning. I'm only like halfway through and it's got 9 channels already. There's 10. So obviously the tuner in this one is a little more sensitive than the tuner in the other one. Here we go. Now we got 16 channels found. We'll see how many this one finds in total. We should be showing the picture on my other screen, because it's a lot clearer than this plasma. This plasma, the picture's not as clear on channel 7. My other TV, the CRT set, is crystal clear. Even this little black and white set is crystal clear. But it looks like it's going to find 17 channels. So clearly this box is working a little better than the other one. There, okay, it's done. Let's tune it in and see what it picks up. Now that is pretty amazing. This is a KBTC. I've got my picture enlarged on the screen here. I've got to adjust the aspect ratio. This is KBTC. I'll put it on my other TV. There it is on my CRT set with the severe burn-in. KBTC, that's a PBS station out of Seattle. And I don't get that on my regular TV because my televisions all are on an antenna facing north to pull in the Vancouver stations. This one's on an antenna, but it's just an omnidirectional antenna on the other side of the house. No reflector or anything, so this kind of picks up signals from every direction. But the other box didn't see these channels, and this one does. So two identical boxes, and one, the tuner is much more sensitive than the other. This is probably the one that I'm going to put into service because I can add some stations, or add a station to my network, my analog feed, that I don't get anywhere else. And maybe the NHK World Service might be one that I might put on. That's a news service out of NHK, out of Japan. I might put that one on. Here we go. The NHK News, NHK World Service. Transmitted on channel 28.2, and there's also a 28.3. But that's coming off that one. And I apologize that I had to distort the screen when I was talking before, but I didn't want to get hit with, even though it was PBS, I didn't know what they were broadcasting, whether I would get a copyright match for shooting the screen. So while I was talking on that last segment, I was messing with the screen so that I wouldn't get picked on. So you see the screen flipping upside down and inverting back and forth every 6 or 7 seconds. That's the reason I was doing it. I don't think I got to worry too much about this though, getting matched for copyright. But anyway, that's NHK World Service. So for those unaware, this NHK World Service is an English language broadcast from Tokyo. So it's kind of like a news channel and stuff. But anyway, it's kind of an interesting one that I might watch. Now that I've got this box working, I can put it on one of my spare modulators. I'm going to throw that third one up and see why it's not picking anything up, but I have a feeling the tuner is probably foobar on it. I tell you, there's nothing like watching a real black and white movie on a black and white TV. It's great. I definitely don't want to show this one for any length of time because that's an Elvis movie, and that'll get me shut down pretty darn quick. Okay, this is the one that wasn't tuning anything. I reseated the connectors on here, and it all of a sudden started tuning. So I don't know whether it was the power connector wasn't seated properly, but this one's working now too. Did nothing else to it. This had the one capacitor change. This is the one that was it would turn on, but it had the bad 22 microfarad cap. What was completely dead, and when I first tried getting it to tune, it wouldn't tune anything. This is with the little indoor antenna mounted on the wall. So I'm going to go back to the third one, the one that is kind of deaf, and see if I can get it to pick anything up now off this antenna up on the wall. Let me go grab that from, it's still in the house. Let me go grab that. We'll hook that one up and see if it'll work any better now. Maybe I'll end up with 3 for 3. Wouldn't that be something? Okay, so this is the one that wouldn't tune anything in. I'm going to change out this little cap here, E6. Which was right here on the board. It's 100 microfarad, 16 volts, and it's measuring a little high on the ESR scale. So let me grab another one and we'll see whether this one will boot up. And if it does, then I'll have 3 for 3 that will work. making people cringe. Okay, let's try this one now and see whether this one will pick up anything. Red light. I got my DTD boot up sequence. Let's see whether we're going to actually get anything on this now. It'd be great if I have 3 for 3. Well, that's not supposed to do that. Turn it off and turn it back on. These little boxes sometimes do weird things when they start up. Hey, okay. Yeah, this is the one that this is the one that was a bit deaf. The other ones pick up signal much better. So this one here is not as sensitive. This is the one that was worked fine on the other antenna, but on this little patch antenna, it certainly is not working as well. As you can see, the signal is weak on this. I wonder if it's a connection inside the tuner. I just give the tuner a wrap and now it's coming in better. We'll pull the tuner shield off and take a look inside the tuner. So when it wasn't tuning anything and I gave the tuner a tap, these tuner types, these tuner modules are notorious for developing bad connections, especially along these pins along the edge here. They're notorious for that. When all the Sony tuner troubles I had over the years, and we had to resolder all these tuners, it was ridiculous, but we did hundreds and hundreds of these things, and they typically fracture. Grounds typically go bad, like this one right here. If we look down here on the board, I'll bring the camera in so I can get good focus. You'll notice what I'm talking about. Like right down here, we get bad solder on the grounds and a lot of these pins here. So it's worth a good inspection, because these tuners were, all these tuners were really quite problematic over the years. And the fact that I just, when this one wasn't receiving anything, I just gave it a tap. See some more of these grounds right here. Right? You see these connections here? They look horrible. Oh yeah, look at that. We used to go through these tuners, not so much these tuners, but this type of design of tuner when I was in the business with Sony tuners. Rather than change a tuner, we would take the tuner out and we would go through all these connections, resolder them all. 9 times out of 10, we fixed the problem with the tuner and saved the customer some money. Because the tuners themselves were typically over $100 for the tuner. You know, typically 120 bucks for the actual part, and then the labor, of course. So we would take the old tuner out and repair it and put it back in and fix it for less than the cost of the actual buying the tuner. I'm just changing to my ultra fine solder tip here. We're going to go over those connections together. Okay, I'm going to put my light on. Oops. I'm going to turn it on here. Get my big magnifying glass on so I can see what I'm doing. And then we're going to go to town and redo all these connections. I should be using finer solders, but this will work. It's typically the grounds that cause all the problem, because they ground the board in multiple places, and you get one that goes open and you'll lose the ground to a particular portion of the board. So the ones that I'm most interested in are these ground pins here. And there's a good probability that this will fix the sensitivity problem on this particular little module. I'll do all the pins coming into the board too along here.
Okay, I think I'm going to try that now. Got one more over here. Definitely looks bad. This one here too. Okay, I'm going to try this now. And remember, before it was, use my flashlight there. Before it was not picking anything up, it was just freezing. So let's, we'll put the top back on the tuner, the shield. And power it up and see whether it's made any difference. So I'll power it up. And when it boots up, am I going to get a picture? And it looks like it's still freezing. Still deaf. And if I tap that tuner, it'll probably come back. So there's still probably a broken connection in here. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Just had to power cycle it to reset it. Now this is an indoor antenna, so the signal is not as strong, but it appears to be working a little bit better. Yeah, I think I got it. I think it was just those connections inside that module, that tuner module, because now it's not breaking up. That's a weak station. That's it. This one. These are weak. These are relatively weak. These channels. Shopping channel. I'll do a scan and see if I can get any of the local channels. Again, I'm not using a proper antenna. This is just an indoor antenna. Auto scan. We'll see what I find now. This is what I'm using for an antenna. It's inside. It's inside the shop here, so not much of an antenna. It's still scanning in channels. So we'll let it go through and see what I get on this thing. So I put the antenna outside. What a difference in terms of reception from that little antenna. Now this thing is picking up everything. Gotta like it. Free TV. And more selection than what you would get off of your local cable company. Antenna's facing the wrong way for that channel. I should be able to get that. I'm going to scan my channels through here again, but now I've put it outside, it's pulling a few more channels in. Anyway, still not as good as my rooftop antenna, but for testing purposes, it's fine. This is fixed out. I'm 3 for 3. I'm happy. Got all my converter boxes working again, and that's going to wind up this excessively long video. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you again next time. Bye for now.